Hey, you're going to see a picture of the lunar surface if you watch television, because it's in advertising, it's everywhere, it's in magazines, it's for kids' cereals, it doesn't matter what it is. It's even for car advertising. I saw one the other day using the lunar rover. That's how NASA keeps putting it out there, and they've got the budget to do it. So they're keeping people in the rabbit hole. But the reality is, those images of that surface are not anything like what the moon is going to be like. That's no different than a Hollywood image that is created.
One day, somebody, probably a Chinese, will get back to the moon and will look at it and say, it's not at all like what I thought it would look like. Well, there's Apollo photographs for real. And a lot of people will then start wondering about it. And NASA don't dare allow that to happen, which is why they continue to insert themselves into actually every space program around, whether it's the Israeli, whether it's the Indian or the Chinese or the Japanese. NASA has a major input to try to ensure that they don't blow the whistle. They don't expose NASA's fraudulent behavior. But eventually it will happen.
Not my lifetime, that's for sure. Yep. Even if they do put something on the moon, they'll say, oh, we're on the far side of the moon, or we're on the poles, or wherever that you can't see with the telescope, right? Oh, it looks different here. We happen to be in this crater because it was unique.
Those excuses can only go on for so long, and eventually there will be enough people like us. I mean, maybe we're the pioneers here. We're asking the right questions. We're looking at the right information and asking the right questions. That's called thinking critically, thinking scientifically. We make mistakes. I make mistakes. I'm sure everybody makes mistakes. Just because we make a mistake doesn't mean that everything we say is wrong. It isn't. Everything we say can be confirmed. I try not to say anything that I cannot produce the evidence for it. When we say that photographic film cannot work in a vacuum, we can show NASA say the same thing.
Exactly. Well, that's one of the biggest things about showing any evidence to it. It's like, those are NASA's photographs.
Yeah.
Why should anybody become annoyed at me? There's no reason to become annoyed at me. I did not take the photograph.
But you know what people are forgetting here is that the article that we put up on the OWLA site with the photography showing what happens, and this is only at around 75,000 feet, and the tint, the hues, the colors wash out, all these kind of strange things happen. And then another film strip, I also gave a 1-second burst of 2 gigs worth of radiation from the microwave oven, just to see what would happen, and it's all fogged. Now, if this is what happens at 75,000 feet to film, what is going to happen when that film is out there in values of 10 to the 10 minus 3, minus 6, and you get to the moon, it's minus 11, minus 12, depending on what you read. They say, well, we don't really see that much of a difference. And yeah, well, you can see a difference. You just have to look. What we did was show what happens at 70 to 75,000 feet, and it only takes a little bit of common sense to say, hey, this is what happens, and now what's going to happen when that's on the moon?
People, you show them something, and they get upset, but you're showing it from NASA. And if I open up a PDF file and say, look, they've modified it. I didn't modify it, NASA did. They're putting up misinformation on themselves sometimes, I think, so they can get people to argue about it. But in the photographs, in the film footage, NASA produced that. If you want to be upset, get upset with NASA. Don't get upset with anybody else. When I sit there and show you that's a wet flag, you can deny it, you can do whatever, it's still a wet flag. But I didn't take the photograph, and I didn't post it online for everybody to see. You want to get upset? Go ahead, call NASA. Ask them what the hell is up with this photograph. How did that flag get wet? Show them that mud on that piece of foil laying on the ground there, all covered and cracked and falling apart, and say, how did you do that? Show them Buzz Aldrin on that thing and show them that there's no control panel inside that model they put up, and say, how dare you have the balls to do that even when you're trying to fake it and simulate it How dare you get that sloppy with it, right? But don't blame it on anybody else. Don't get angry at anybody else because they saw it and then showed it to you, because it's right there.
And this is where Stanley Kubrick goes right out the door.
Yeah.
Because he would not have allowed such mistakes to occur, not in any of his productions.
Any of that footage is completely amateurish when you're looking at it. And of course, when you start looking at all of the other pieces of equipment there and see that the central station has nothing in it, it's just a piece of junk sitting there with a oil furnace starter on the side of it, pilot starter on the side of the thing with a cord running off. The thing they call the RTG is sitting there. It needs 2 or 3 other pieces of equipment to make it function as a generating station to run the equipment and charge the battery. There's at least 2 pieces completely missing from that have to be there to make it run. You just can't grab that power off of there and charge your battery up. You need to have a rectifier in there to start with and a voltage regulator. And that's with all of the pieces of equipment.
Here's the thing with that piece of equipment. It's got the computer in it, and it has the regulator in it, it's got the inverter in it. But here's the thing, it's a computer. How come that computer can lay flat down on the lunar surface, right in the sunlight, when the temperature, now we're talking about induction here, right? That is going to be 250 degrees Fahrenheit where that computer's sitting.
I would think the radiation coming off the surface would completely just shatter any transmission that the computer would be having. It would just destroy it.
Yeah, because when the ISS orbits the Earth and it orbits into the South Atlantic anomaly, which is over Brazil, they have to switch the computers off in case they get short-circuited. That's what radiation does to electronics. It doesn't do it any good at all. So there's a lot of stories about computers in space. They have to be particularly well built. They have to be hardened against the radiation. So why weren't they hardened on Apollo? Because they didn't know that they had to do it.
Because NVIDIA was contracted to do all the graphics and stuff for the International Space Station, right? And they just said, oh, it's not a big enough project. There's so few pieces that we're building for them. It's not worth our time. Yeah. And yet I've got the PDF files showing how rapidly their graphics cards were destroyed by radiation.
Yeah, because they weren't designed to operate in radiation because nobody told them that they had to be.
Like I said, NASA asked them and said, here's the radiation numbers, try build graphic cards for us. They tried, failed, and said, we're not getting anywhere. We can't build anything to protect against that radiation, so we just canceled the contract. So as an alternate, they put up that little video that they did.
The trouble is they got found out because they know it was a brilliantly executed propaganda exercise. The whole Apollo missions were designed for one purpose, which it was successful in. Let's not forget that. But let's not fool ourselves that because it was propaganda, that suddenly becomes real science. So where are these scientists who can now call them out on it? They're not there. Or they're just parroting what NASA has said that they should say.
They were successful at doing, I guess, was to refocus the population of the United States from all of the problems that they were having, the racial problems and Vietnam and the whole 9 yards and all their other politics, and they focused together because they were well behind after the Second World War. Other countries were advancing much quicker. They were well behind in everything. So that money that went into there was a big infrastructure bill for them to go in. And that's why all 50 states, everything was being built right across all 50 states. They all got a piece of the pie. And that brought the United States up on an economic level. And instead of them arguing about what they're doing today, if they looked at that and how that worked, they'd be all for it to bring themselves back one more time. Because they were falling behind. I mean, Japan, even Taiwan. I mean, you could buy a little pocket radio from Taiwan in the 60s, right? How did they get the technology? U.S. couldn't build it. They weren't building anything. Even when they must have realized in the early 60s, even when Honda started building motorcycles and shipping them across the United States, and people are gobbling them up, and all they've got is big old iron motorcycles running, and then people are buying millions of these bloody bikes, right? And they're going, we're behind, because even Japan, that they devastated in the Second World War, is coming up economically ahead of them. A little weak country as well. Not just that. And you can see the problem that the ego of the United States has is, holy Christ, we got to do something here, right? I think that's what really prompted it to kick that much money out. Focus everybody on one thing. Give everybody jobs. Like, they basically gave 10% of the population a job, but if you realize that that transfers through a hell of a lot farther than that, because there's families of 4 or 5 that they're now supporting, right? It brought the entire economy up.
When we say that photographic film cannot work in a vacuum, we can show NASA say the same thing.
Why should anybody become annoyed at me? There's no reason to become annoyed at me. I did not take the photograph. I did not scan it and put it online for everybody to see.
Quite right, quite right, quite right.